Welcome into another edition of Conversations with Paul Brown. If you were with us last week, you may remember we were talking to Dewey Boyd, who went to Hannah, lived in Anderson, and is now in Nashville. And he came back home because he's part of the Ricky Skaggs Bluegrass Band. He runs the audio portion of the show.
I interned for a while with Paul Moak, who's a great producer, and he hired me to be his assistant. And so I was with him for a total of about 3 years. And then, but I realized in that process that in the music industry anymore, there just really aren't jobs. You don't just go to a studio and get a job. If you want to work producing music or recording music, you just have to do it. You have to become an entrepreneur whether you want to or not. My wife and I started looking around for a place to buy. At first we thought we were looking for a house and had to go back to the drawing board after seeing that be unsuccessful for a while, and we realized that the real problem was I needed a place to work. So we switched our property search to commercial properties, and this was in 2012. And so we found a building that was an old bungalow right on the main road in East Nashville, and we're able to buy it. And so I opened my own recording studio. Paul gently nudged me out of the nest. I was willing to keep working for him and try to run my own recording studio, and he wisely showed me that was a terrible idea. Went to work putting together my own place. I did that with 2 other guys.
Did it have a name?
It does. It's called 4115. It's at 4115 Gallatin Pike in Nashville. And so myself, a guy named Taylor Bray, and a guy named Jeff Braun got together, put all of our gear and instruments together. We realize that when you're recording music, even if you're booked end to end, most of what you need a big space for is recording a band or recording drums. So much of the process is post-production and mixing that you wouldn't necessarily need the big space for more than a third of the time at most. And so we made a shared Google Calendar and just went at it. And my wife and I actually lived there for the first year and a half in the upstairs of the building, which tells you how saintly my wife is. She'd come home to anywhere between 5 and 70 people. We might have a house concert over there. And we kept doing that, but I picked back up doing live sound just as a side weekend gig because it's difficult to make money as a recording studio. I mean, the music industry is really all over the place. All 3 of us were both producers and engineers, so sometimes we would work with artists and see their project from conception all the way through it was finished.
And when you say you produced, tell me what that entails.
Yeah, so that's meeting with an artist and finding out exactly what it is they want to do, being hands-on musically, figuring out who all needs to be involved with the project, walking through the budget, and then setting up the time, really managing and overseeing the process as a whole.
Do you bring in the people that are going to be part of the studio band, so to speak?
Yes, yeah. It's generally a collaboration between the artist and myself or whoever's doing the production to choose. But there's such a vast set of resources in Nashville of people who are just phenomenal players. And so you can choose, which phenomenal drummer you want, whose instincts you think will line up with the type of music that you're doing or who this artist is.
And as a result of being there, you begin to know these guys, you know what they can bring to the project,
yeah.
That you know them personally, you can... All right, and so then beginning to end on the project at the end, you give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether or not we release it?
Well, usually at that point too much money has been spent, so...
Not to release it.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, hopefully the idea is that all along the way you're doing the quality control real time, which of course is difficult. And different projects call for different things, and sometimes you do have to go back and redo things if you end up not being satisfied. But not everything's recorded all at once, so you have some time to process and see what you like or what you didn't. And with digital editing and post-production, there's a whole lot that can be done to just as an honest part of the creative process, or to salvage something that you don't like.
Can you give us an idea of the spectrum? You could produce a song for Joe Schmo from Delaware, low budget.
Oh boy.
For this much. And then if Willie comes to town and he's doing a project,
sure.
What's the difference?
Well, for myself, I don't really do a difference between an independent rate and a label rate. My scale might slide a little bit if it's something that I really want to do, and I know that the person might not be able to afford it.
Okay.
As the owner of the studio, I'm able to kind of roll together studio time and my services a bit more. So I have a little bit of wiggle room, but in general, and this isn't a hard rule, because really you have to get a little bit into pre-production where you're figuring out, well, what do these songs even need before you can really nail down what a budget would be.
You've established yourself in Nashville now with your own little production company. You've got clients. You're putting out good work. Does the time come when you say, I need to expand and do more, do something else? Is that when the road thing comes into play?
Yeah, well, it came into play because it's, I'm working mostly at this point in my career with independent artists, and so it is difficult to get the funding that you need to do a project well. And because I have a building that I have to keep up, it isn't inherently expensive to do. I picked live sound back up because I needed to fill out the rest of my
And give our listeners a definition of live sound.
Yeah, so live sound is mixing a show live. So being at the mixing console and blending the different microphones together to make what the audience hears. I'd been doing it kind of all along in church as well, right. But so I never quite put it down. But I never done it, I guess, professionally. And there was a wedding corporate event band that needed a substitute. And so I subbed in. I did whatever gigs the main guy couldn't do. That was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. Gosh, maybe 4 or 5 now. And so I kind of got connected with them, and then next year rolled around and they hired me to be the main guy. And that was so much fun. I love those people, but it was grueling work.
Was it really?
It was, yeah. Well, because we'd come to a wedding and it would be, we'd be the party band for the reception. And we had this 11-piece band and a full PA, 8 wedges on the stage, so 8 monitors pointed back at the band and the main PA.
And you got to set this all up.
And I've got to set it all up. Thankfully, the band was really hands-on, and they helped carry everything. But at the end of the day, I'm still the one who has to plug everything in. And when wedding receptions aren't generally in places that are designed to have a drum kit and horns and loud amps. And so I had to get fast and really adept at making non-ideal systems and situations work. I ended up buying my own console for the gig. The technology's changed so much now that you can actually mix a show from an iPad.
Can you really?
Yeah, in fact, that's what I do for Ricky's show. I'll be mixing it today from an iPad. And so, but I bought my own console to do that with, because in these wedding receptions, the mixing board would always be set up behind the speakers side stage, because nobody wants that set up
front,
next to the bride and groom's table or something. And so it was so frustrating to have to walk back and forth or be on headphones. And there was the gig that broke me on it was, we were in Louisville, Kentucky, and the band set up on stage, and the PA there's 2 feet of brick between me and the PA. It's on the other side. And to get out to the dance floor, I had to walk behind the curtains, behind the band, all the way around, go through catering, and then go out to the dance floor. Like, this can't possibly go on. So I got my own iPad-controlled rig and got really used to it and comfortable with it. And then it turned out now that it's the same console that I used for Ricky's gig. So I got a whole lot of practice in far less ideal circumstances to do this.
Doing the wedding band, guys. It's Ricky Skaggs time.
Yeah. One of the fellows that I opened the recording studio with, Taylor Bray, he was hired as Ricky's monitor engineer. So
what's a monitor engineer?
Yeah, a monitor engineer. So everybody on the stage in Ricky's band, they have in-ear monitors, so they have like little tiny headphones inside. And so there's somebody who has to mix those. So in Ricky's band, there's normally 7 people, and so Taylor was mixing all 7 of their in-ear mixes. And so he went on to work with a a pop country duo called Dan and Shay, and they tour, I guess, internationally now. But so he's still with them, and when he needed a replacement, he gave me a call, but my son was about to be born, and I said, I can't believe I'm about to turn down working for Ricky Skaggs, but I'm going to turn down working for Ricky Skaggs. So he called another one of our good friends, Grant Hartford, and he's definitely the right man for the job. And so he's still the monitor engineer and tour engineer, or tour manager. But a few years went by, and Grant needed a vacation. And so Grant went backpacking or something, and I got to sub in for him. And then I got to see what it was like to tour with Ricky Skaggs on a tour bus. And, I've been working really hard to make, half as much money doing the wedding band gig. And I told Grant, I was like, Grant, if you ever get tired of this, it's a really family man or old man tour in a sense, even though a lot of the guys are younger than me. But I was like, this is a set of circumstances I could really work with. February of 2017, Grant gave me a call, and I thought he was quitting. I thought I was about to get his job, but it turned out it was better than that. They needed a new guy to mix the show, to mix the front of house, which is what the audience hears, which in some ways, as an audio engineer, I feel like it has more prestige because it's what the other people hear.
Not just the performers.
Yeah, but I was like, don't you want to do that? Because you've been around, you deserve this. You know what's happening. I don't know. And he was like, no, I want to live in my world of perfection and not have to deal with pushing sound through speakers through air.
Yeah.
And he was just taking on the tour manager responsibilities as well. He's like, I don't want 2 new jobs. I'll just take one. You can come and just mix the show. So he has to deal with 7 mixes, and I deal with 1. And I said yes.
What was it like the first time you were at the board?
Oh, it was.
Remember where it was?
We were in Arlington, Texas. So he called me on a Tuesday because we were going to Texas on Thursday or Friday night. And someone else had been doing that job for the last 20 years. So if you had seen Ricky Skaggs in the last 20 years, unless it was at the Opry, it had been mixed by the same guy. And so I was stepping into a role that was a lot bigger than myself. And really, my only exposure to bluegrass at that point was subbing in for Grant and just kind of passively being around it. And suddenly, I was more than waist deep into mixing for Ricky Skaggs. So it was a steep and fast learning curve to jump into that. But it really turned out that the guys in the band had enjoyed me on the bus when I went sub for them before. And in that sense, they had heard my work because I was doing the monitors for them. But they had never heard me mix front of house before. But Ricky's a really prayerful man, and I think he had prayed a lot about what they were going to do, and he remembered me, and he had heard my name from a couple people, and so they gave me a call. And really, the first weekend I went out, it was very tentative because it was a hard choice. I have a wife and a son. To be like, well, how many shows are we going to be doing? How big of a commitment is this? And but the way it panned out, that looking at the schedule with the wedding band, I'd have to get up early Saturday, load a trailer, be gone until the show was over, usually around midnight. At the end of these parties, then load up for an hour. And then the same night, get back in the van and ride until 3 or 4 in the morning, and then unload and just be completely out on Sunday. And with the tour bus, if we're doing a weekend like that, if we're going to be gone for that amount of time, it's probably 2 shows. And we'd leave, midnight the night before the first show, sleep through the night, wake up in Arlington, Texas, and do that show, go to sleep again, wake up near San Antonio and play Green Hall, which was my second show, and then come back home and have done 2 shows in roughly the same amount of time, and have slept.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it was really a no-brainer jump on board.
Our guest is Dewey Boyd, and when we come back, we're going to conclude our conversation with him. He's got some great stories to tell us about touring with Ricky, and we're going to hear some of those. A tour is a one, 2 day, 3 day thing. What do you call it?
Yeah. Well, we usually call it, I guess, like a run.
A run. All right.
Yeah, just a
tell
run
me
of
what a
dates.
normal run from the time you leave your house to the time you get back.
Yeah. So normally when we do like a little tour, a little run of dates, we do about 60 to 80 dates a year, and so it varies from just one-offs to 2 or 3 shows in a weekend to occasionally we'll be gone for a week or so. But normally we're on a bus, and so I'll leave home about 10:30, 10:45 at night to get to Ricky's office up in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and we get there early so that myself and Grant, we're the 2 crew members, so we can load the bus. We sublease buses from people, and so we'll load up all the gear onto the tour bus, and the band is kind of arriving as all that's happening, putting luggage and instruments underneath. And then we all go down to Kroger, and we get the food for the bus and water bottles and Keurig coffee things and everything, and of course Ricky's with us as well. And so if you're up late.
Wait. I'm at Kroger minding my own business, and all of a sudden this band, including Ricky Skaggs, comes in and grabs a shopping cart.
Yeah, that's in sweatpants. Everybody's in their bus britches at this point.
Can you get through that without 100 selfies?
Well, yeah, because it's at 12:30 at night. Yeah.
Okay.
So in fact, usually the people who work at Kroger aren't too pleased with the tour bus, no matter where we put it. Because there's nobody there. We just pull right up and get out, and the bus just kind of sits there in front of the store, and off we come in sweatpants and whatever, and we go rummaging through the store, groggily making bad food decisions in the middle of the night, thinking like, what do I need for the next 3 days? I know, some apples and some snap peas, and what potato chips are these? Maybe these $2 cookies are a good choice. And so, we load it up. There's a freezer and a microwave and a refrigerator on the bus, so we come in, we put our goods away. Usually, just like kids showing each other what ridiculous thing we have purchased. But then usually, you go to bed after that. You go.
You have your own bunks?
Yeah. So there's 12 bunks on a bus, and so each of us have our own bunk. And I'm low on the totem pole, so I'm on a top bunk.
Top bunk, okay.
Yeah. All the important people get the middle bunks, and then it goes downhill from there. Yeah, and then we go to sleep, and then wake up in the city where we're playing. And probably one of my favorite things about it is that there's a tour manager who's dealing with all the travel arrangements. So usually by the time I wake up, we're parked in a hotel parking lot. There's hotel keys on the table in the lounge. One has my name on it. Me and Jake, my roommate, on the road, and I grab my key, I go into the hotel, and I can get cleaned up. And usually, if we're only there for just a little bit like we're here today, we only are using the rooms for an hour or a couple hours before we have to check out. And so then, we get back on the bus, and then the bus usually, 2 o'clock or so goes over to the venue, and where we load all of our stuff in, which really doesn't take that much time because we're a bluegrass band. We travel with our own consoles, in-ear monitor rig, and our own microphones, and instruments. But really, aside from that, the venue's providing microphone stands, cables, and all that. So
you play the show because you're going to be at the Civic Center.
Yes.
You were part of the Civic Center in the big second annual Anderson Bluegrass Festival.
Uh-huh.
And there are groups before you, so you just walk in with your little iPad.
Yeah, so so we have a completely self-contained rig, and so we set up everything side stage, and we have our own. It's a little stage box that we plug all the microphones into, and that's actually where it gets converted to a digital form. So there's preamps and everything in that box that's just sitting on the stage, and it goes over a Cat5 cable, just an Ethernet cable to the monitor console. And then from there it splits out to all of their headphones, and that's what Grant's working on. And then there's another Cat5 cable that jumps from that to my console. But because I'm mixing on an iPad, my console is actually just a little rack-mounted unit that connects to a wireless antenna. And so it's the full console, but it's just completely controlled remotely via an iPad. So the beauty of it is all the individual settings for microphones and things are very portable. I've mixed the show over 100 times, and so a lot of that's pretty dialed in. But the puzzle I have to solve every day is what happens to my outputs.
Okay.
How do I push into this PA and into this room in a
And
way?
those are all different. The acoustics are different.
Every time.
Yeah.
Every time. And for the Civic Center, it's particularly exciting because it's what we call a throw and go, which means there's no sound check. And some bands will, in that scenario, they'll come out and they'll do a line check. They'll check one thing at a time and pull things up. But with us, usually the first time, in this scenario, the first time I'll hear anything is when Ricky comes out on stage and says, "Howdy, folks."
Wow.
So I just have to open up the microphone and have my thumb on the digital fader for the main volume and try to place it in the right spot and hope it doesn't feed back immediately, and then ride the bull from there.
And then Anderson's going to be your last show tonight at 9 o'clock. Then you get on the bus and go back home.
Yep, that's right. We've had 3 shows on this little run, and then we go back home tonight.
And you like what you do.
I love it. It's wonderful.
And Ricky's probably one of the better guys you could have picked to work for.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wish I could even say that I picked him, but he's fantastic. Absolutely, yeah. He's such a loving father figure to the band and to the crew. He dotes on us when we're not around, and he compliments us on what other people say about what we've done. If people come and tell him that the show sounded great, he makes sure that he tells me about that. And it's just such a wonderful work environment because someone of his notoriety could and of his discretion. I mean, he's known to be picky Ricky. He won't play out of tune, and he's even a bit of an audiophile himself. His microphone collection is unbelievable.
Really?
Yeah. He has a lot of Neumann microphones from even before World War II, and so much so that the president of Neumann, the microphone company, has come over to have dinner with him to see his microphone collection. So yeah, when Ricky says, has a compliment, it's really meaningful.
Yeah.
It gives us the freedom to make mistakes, to push ourselves, and I think that's part of what makes this band so special. Is that I remember, one of the first times I, forgot to unmute his mandolin microphone at a big show in front of 10,000 people. And I told him about it after the show. And he was like, "Oh, I made a bunch of mistakes too." And in that moment, it really showed me that, one, I'm never going to do that again. Yeah. But also that there was just such great freedom and love that, we could love the people around us because we'd been loved first. And then that's what he was doing for us as well. And it gave us just such great freedom to make mistakes, but also to play with great precision and creativity, and for the whole band to really push beyond just playing it safe. It's easy to get out there and just play it safe, and nobody can connect with that, 'cause that's not what life is really like. So.
What a great way to end. Thank you, Dewey Boyd, for being our guest for the last 2 weeks and your great stories. Welcome back home. Our guest has been Dewey Boyd. Thank you for tuning in, and we invite you to be back with us next week for our next edition of Conversations with Paul Brown. Until then, take care, everybody.